Hi, my name is Neil Donovan, and I never thought I'd be called a beggar by my own sister, not in front of strangers, not in a restaurant I helped build. I ordered a $50 meal, that's all. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We don't serve beggars here." She laughed. The crowd stared, and for a moment, I believed her. But what if I told you that 3 minutes later, she lost everything she stole from me? Would you believe me? I hadn't planned to walk into Ardena that evening. It was one of those restless, impulsive decisions you make after too many nights staring at the ceiling, rerunning conversations you should have had, retorts you never voiced, the kind of decision that blooms from frustration and turns into quiet rebellion. I told myself it was just dinner, just food. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The Austin sky glowed with a bruised sunset, streaks of burnt orange melting into purple. Across the street, Ardena's windows glittered under golden lights. The name still stood bold on the sign, sleek serif letters that once made me proud. Ardena, my father's middle name. My suggestion, once. Back when I believed names could mean permanence, it used to be home, a place where I knew every nail in the floorboards, every spice in the risotto. But now, it looked like a showroom. Clinical, untouched. Like it had shed its skin and forgotten who first gave it life. I lingered on the sidewalk longer than I'd admit. I was dressed simply, black slacks, a fitted coat, and shoes that had seen better days. No designer bag, no statement jewelry, just me. The girl who used to run this place behind the scenes, now wondering if anyone inside would recognize her without a title or clipboard. When I stepped through the door, I was hit by a wave of sound. Cutlery clinking, low laughter, soft jazz floating through the air. It smelled the same: seared butter, wine reductions, rosemary. That hurt more than I expected. A hostess approached, young, unfamiliar. Her eyes scanned me quickly, coat, hair, face. I wasn't what she was expecting. I didn't fit the profile of their usual crowd. "Name?" she asked politely, though the edge in her voice betrayed her assumptions. "Neil Donovan." She blinked. Just once. Then murmured something into the tiny earpiece tucked under her curls. After a pause, she straightened, nodding with that brittle smile some people wear when they're trying to stay professional, but can't quite hide the question in their eyes. "Right this way, Ms. Donovan," she said, leading me toward the dining room. I followed, heels clicking against the floor, nerves wrapped tight beneath my calm exterior. And then I saw where she was taking me, not to a booth, not a window seat or discreet corner, but the center of the restaurant. Right under the chandelier I once fought to include in the renovation budget. Of course. I sat slowly, letting my eyes roam the space. Everything looked more expensive, but less personal. Fancier fonts on the menus, dish names tweaked to sound elevated. But I still recognized them. They were mine. The waiter approached, clean-cut, young, and trying not to look nervous. "I'll have the chef's private cut," I said. "Medium rare." He hesitated. "That's, the $50 steak." I raised an eyebrow. "Yes, that's the one." He blinked, then nodded and walked away, clearly puzzled. And then I saw her. Sable. My sister. She cut across the floor like she owned the oxygen in the room. Red lipstick, perfect hair, heels sharp enough to wound. She always had presence, even when it was unwanted. Her eyes locked onto mine with practiced disdain. "Well, look what the dog dragged in," she said, loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. Didn't know beggars had such refined palates. A few people looked over, one man chuckled, someone else whispered. I didn't respond, not right away. I folded my hands in my lap, kept my chin high. "I placed my order," I said. Sable leaned on the back of a chair, her smirk growing. "Oh, honey, this isn't a soup kitchen. We don't serve pity meals." There were phones out now. A guy at the bar held his up subtly, pretending to scroll while recording. I saw it all. The attention, the pity, the amusement. But I wasn't ashamed. Not anymore. I'd given too many years to that emotion. "I'm a paying customer," I said evenly. "You may want to review your discrimination policy." Sable rolled her eyes. You think anyone here remembers you? You left, Neil. You walked out. This place belongs to people who stayed and built something. I built this place, I said softly, long before you ever took credit for it. Before the conversation could explode, another voice interrupted. Ah, Neil, my mother. Vera looked every bit the elegant matriarch she styled herself to be. Cream dress, pearls, hair in a neat twist. But her eyes? They didn't meet mine. She approached like she was handling fragile glass. She leaned close, her voice low. Don't embarrass your sister, please. Just go quietly. Don't make a scene. A fist tightened in my chest. Of course she chose image over integrity. Again, I drew a breath, forced my hands to stay calm. I won't make a scene, I said aloud, standing slowly. But I will make a return. Gasps. A few hushed laughs. Sable stared like I'd grown a second head. I turned and walked toward the door, the restaurant's eyes trailing me. And just before I reached the exit, I caught a familiar face. Emily. She had been a hostess when I still worked here. Barely 20. Sweet. Hardworking. Her eyes widened as she saw me. She looked scared. No, not scared. Moved. I gave her the smallest nod. You'll see me again, I said, voice low, meant only for her. Then I pushed the door open and stepped out into the evening air. The sky was darker now, city lights flickering on. And with each step away from Ardena, I felt something crack open inside me. Not pain, not regret. Resolve. This wasn't the end. They'd humiliated me for a meal. But next time, I wouldn't come hungry. I'd come for the whole damn table. By the time I got home that night, the Austin sky had turned a deeper indigo, lit only by the amber glow of my porch light. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the key in the lock. Not from fear, anger had replaced that a long time ago, but from something heavier, the kind of hurt that sits behind your ribs and just pulses there, stubborn. Inside, I dropped my purse onto the hallway bench and walked straight into the kitchen. I didn't bother with lights, just opened the fridge, poured a glass of water, and stood there in the dark, letting the cool silence settle over me. My apartment was modest, clean, tucked in the east side of town where the rents hadn't fully caught up to Austin's tech boom. The walls were painted in calming earth tones, and on the mantel above the fireplace sat a single photo, me, Sable, and Dad. I'd kept it because he looked so happy in it. Now, I saw that smile differently. I sat down at the dining table, opened my laptop, and typed in one word. Ardena. The site loaded with sleek animation, the same deep green I had picked for our early menus. It looked professional, no doubt. Well-funded. Beautiful, even. But as I clicked to the About Us page, the air caught in my throat. Founded by Sable Donovan in honor of her late father. That was it. That was the story now. No mention of the pitch nights, the grease-stained napkin I sketched our first logo on. No photos from the pop-up kitchen we started in my studio apartment. Nothing about the 2 years I poured every dime I had into our dream. I scrolled harder, frantically at first, then slower, like I was mourning something as I went. I wasn't just cut out of the picture. I had been erased, cleanly, deliberately. I opened the team bios, a head chef I didn't know, a marketing director I hadn't hired, a tribute page to Dad, well-written, tear-jerking. But again, only Sable's name. My father inspired every recipe I've ever loved, she wrote. Ardena is his legacy, and mine. I leaned back, numb. Funny thing is, I still remembered the day we named the restaurant. It wasn't Sable's idea. She'd wanted something flashy, like sizzle. But I remembered that little herb Dad used to grow in coffee cans on our windowsill. Ardena, bitter, strong, and hard to kill. Just like him. Just like I thought we were. And I was the one who said it aloud. Let's call it Ardena. I remember Sable laughing, calling it weird. But she went along with it, because back then, I still had some pull. That memory played like a reel in my mind. I could still smell the chicken stock bubbling in the old pot. I could still hear our dad's whistle as he peeled carrots behind me. That was the kitchen we built this dream in, not the glossy marble ones they posted on Instagram now. Snapping back to the present, I opened my email and searched for Diego's contact. He had worked with me during the first expansion, handled supplies, budgeting, all the dirty back-end work. If anyone knew what was going on now, it'd be him. I shot off a short message. Hey Diego, it's Neil. Hope you're well. Had some questions about Ardena. Can we talk? I hit send. Waited. Nothing. I refreshed. Still nothing. I tried LinkedIn. Found another old teammate, Stacy. Her profile now said, Operations Director at Ardena. I sent her a message too. She responded within 5 minutes. Hey, Neil. Wow, been a long time. We thought you left the business. Heard you gave up your shares? Shares. My stomach flipped. I hadn't signed anything, not that I remembered. But things were blurry near the end. Dad had passed. Grief swallowed everything. Sable had taken over more and more of the day-to-day. I started pulling away, not because I didn't care, but because I was exhausted, and maybe I hadn't read everything she'd sent. I typed back quickly. No, I never gave up anything. Who told you that? No response. I slammed the laptop shut and stood abruptly, pacing. My breath was shallow, my chest tight. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. They hadn't just replaced me, they'd rewritten the whole damn history. The next morning, I left my apartment early. I needed air and answers. I ended up at Gilda's, the coffee shop I used to hold meetings at with potential investors. The place hadn't changed much. Same baristas, same indie playlist humming from the ceiling speakers. But when I approached the counter, the guy behind it gave me a polite, blank smile. Welcome to Gilda's. What can I get started for you? Hey, I said. Is Marcy around? He paused. Marcy doesn't work here anymore. Hasn't for a couple of years. I nodded, muttered an order, and took my coffee to a window seat. That was when I heard it. 2 young chefs at the next table were deep in conversation. Sable's a beast, one of them said. I mean, who starts a full chain from scratch and still runs the kitchen like a general? The other one laughed. Yeah, Ardena's like the blueprint now. You see that Forbes piece? Called her the visionary behind the family empire. I stared at the foam in my cup, hand clenched around the sleeve. Empire. Family. I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a dry exhale. Visionary? She couldn't even boil an egg until she was 26. I left the shop without finishing my drink. That evening, I came home to the shadows waiting inside my apartment. The light through the blinds painted stripes across my living room floor. I sat down in front of the old storage box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were folders, photos, receipts, samples of branding. And near the bottom, beneath a curled manila envelope, I found it. The original pitch deck. The same one we used to raise our first $20,000. My name was on the cover, bold and centered. Ardena. Concept by Neil Donovan. I ran my fingers over the ink. It felt like touching bone. You didn't just rewrite the story, I whispered, my voice steady now. You stole it. I didn't sleep that night. The box stayed open on the coffee table, its contents scattered like the aftermath of a small war. My name, printed, typed, handwritten, stared back at me from old documents, old menus, invoices signed with the steady penmanship I'd practiced as a young woman desperate to look professional. But it wasn't the papers that kept me awake. It was the thought of how cleanly I'd been cut out. No fight. No trace. Just gone. By sunrise, I was still sitting there, surrounded by proof of the life I used to own. The city outside was waking up. Cars rolling by, dogs barking, the smell of someone's morning toast sneaking in through the window. I wanted to believe it was a normal day. But there was nothing normal about realizing that the story you built with your hands had been stolen by blood. I turned back to my laptop, clicked the Ardena site again, and went straight to the menu page. I knew what I was looking for before I even scrolled halfway. There it was. Chef Sable's signature lamb. Spiced cedar lamb with blackberry reduction. I stared at the photo. I didn't need to read the description. I could smell it just from memory. The cedar smoke, the faint sweetness of the berries. That was mine. That was my dish, the one I made for Dad's birthday. I remembered that night like it was yesterday. We were still working out of the old house then. The kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people, but I insisted on making something new. I had spent all week testing recipes, trying to create something that reminded Dad of the outdoors he loved. He'd been tired lately, coughing more, pretending it was nothing. I wanted to make him something special, something that tasted like comfort and strength. The lamb came out perfectly that night, tender, smoky, with the blackberry reduction cutting through the richness. When I placed the plate in front of him, he took one bite, smiled through tired eyes, and said, "This one belongs in a restaurant, kiddo." He always called me that, kiddo, even when I was 30. I looked across the table at Sable. She was scrolling on her phone, bored. She didn't even look up. When Dad asked what she thought, she shrugged and said, "Too rustic. People don't want berries on their meat, Neil." I'd laughed back then, brushing it off. But now, staring at the photo on the Ardennes site, the caption reading Chef Sable's signature creation, I felt the laugh turn to acid in my throat. Back in the present, I sat motionless, my hands flat against the table. The hum of my refrigerator filled the silence. Every memory was being rewritten, repackaged, and sold under her name. My recipes, my designs, my sweat, my family's legacy, all wrapped up in glossy lies. Around mid-morning, as I stared blankly at the screen, my inbox chimed. One new message, no subject line. No sender I recognized, just a blank address and an attachment icon. I hovered over it for a few seconds, half expecting it to be spam or a virus, but something, intuition maybe, told me to open it. Inside was a single PDF file. When I clicked it, a familiar letterhead appeared. My breath hitched. It was old, dated 2013. Ardena Group, Inc. Founding Partnership Agreement. At the bottom were 2 signatures, my father's and mine. I blinked hard. My heart started to pound. I remembered signing it, at his desk, the day we filed for incorporation. He'd been proud, talking about how we were going to build something that would outlive us both. And right there, on page 2, it said in plain text, Neil Donovan, co-founder and executive culinary director. It was legal. It was binding. It was mine. Someone had scrubbed my name from the public record, but they couldn't erase this. I scrolled to the end, looking for the signature line again, running my cursor over the faded scan. The edges of the paper looked torn, like someone had tried to dispose of it. Whoever sent this, whoever dug this up, must have gone through something to find it. At the bottom of the email, there was one line. You deserve to be seen again. A known hero. My throat tightened. Whoever they were, they knew the truth. I sat back, staring at the computer screen as the light shifted through the blinds. There was a sharpness in my chest, but beneath it, something else stirred. Not just anger, not even grief, resolve. For years, I'd let myself believe it was better to walk away, to let them have the spotlight as long as I had my peace. But now it wasn't just about peace. It was about justice, about reclaiming what had been built from my hands, my nights without sleep, my father's last words of encouragement. I reopened my browser and searched for Ardena Group filings. It took seconds to find the latest corporate documentation. I scrolled through line after line, and there it was, plain as day. Founder, Sable Donovan. Executive Culinary Director, vacant. My name was gone, replaced by blank space, as if I'd never existed. I sat there for a long while, staring at those 2 words, vacant. And something inside me snapped into focus. They hadn't just taken my credit, they'd buried me legally. That's why Sable could stand there in front of a crowd, smile for cameras, and rewrite history without blinking. She hadn't just stolen the narrative, she'd built paperwork to make it real. But that anonymous email? It meant someone out there remembered. Someone who wanted me to fight. I looked around my apartment, quiet, small, filled with the ghosts of what I'd lost. Then my eyes landed on the old leather-bound notebook sitting on the shelf. My ideas book. Pages filled with recipes, notes, old dreams. I pulled it down, flipped to a clean page, and stared at the blank paper. Then, in slow, deliberate strokes, I wrote one word across the center in block letters: lawyer. I leaned back, watching the ink dry. My heartbeat steadied. The decision settled into me like the first breath after surfacing from deep water. I whispered, "Let's see how you like a paper trail, Sable." The sound of my own voice startled me a little. It was calm, measured, almost dangerous. I closed the notebook, placed it on the table beside the old pitch deck, and exhaled slowly. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about restoration. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city that had grown around me, too fast, too shiny, too full of people chasing credit for things they hadn't earned. Somewhere down there, Sable was living a lie built on my bones, but not for long. When the apartment door clicked shut behind me, the echo lingered in the narrow hallway like a whisper of finality. The sound didn't just mark my return, it marked a shift, the first deliberate step into the unknown. I stood motionless for a beat, listening to the familiar silence of my space. It felt smaller now, tighter somehow, not because the walls had moved, but because something inside me had cracked open, and I wasn't sure if it was resolve or rage, maybe both. I slipped off my shoes slowly, moved to the living room, and flicked on the floor lamp. A warm yellow glow splashed across the worn rug. I reached for my leather-bound notebook, the one Dad gave me when we opened our first food truck. Its spine had frayed over the years, its pages dog-eared and stained with memories, but it remained whole, just like me. The night outside was still, the sky heavy with clouds, threatening rain, but holding back like it knew I needed this silence. My reflection caught in the window, shoulders squared, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Not broken, just rebuilding. I remembered something my father used to say when I was young and impulsive: "Don't raise your voice, raise your game." At the time, I thought he meant professionalism. Now I saw it was about power, real power. Not the kind Sable flaunted in boardrooms or at charity galas, but the kind built quietly over time, on truth, on preparation. I sat at the kitchen counter, opened the notebook, and began pulling pieces of my story together. Not memories, evidence, recipes in my handwriting from before Ardina's launch, photos from our early test kitchen nights, invoices that bore only my name, emails where Dad referred to my ideas as the spark that got us off the ground, menus that matched my journal entries word for word, even sticky notes from a planning session where I'd outlined the seasonal concept that later became a trademark of the brand. Each artifact was a rebuttal to the narrative Sable had rewritten without me. I created folders on my computer, organized, time-stamped, cross-referenced. One folder I labeled simply Redemption. It was the opposite of revenge. It was reclamation. By the time the sun crept across the blinds and cast thin lines of gold onto the hardwood floor, I had one thing I hadn't had in a long time: clarity. The next day, I walked into a small law office tucked between a bakery and a used bookstore downtown. It didn't scream power, it whispered it. Ivy curled along its windows, and the air inside carried the scent of old paper and quiet battles. I'd already met with a junior partner weeks ago, just in case I ever reached this point. But today, I was here for Astria Lynn herself, founder, litigator, and the woman known for dismantling companies from the inside out with nothing but paperwork and timing. She greeted me with a firm handshake and calm eyes. "You're ready," she said without waiting for confirmation. I handed her a folder labeled Donovan v. Ardina, Private Materials. Inside were copies of everything I'd spent the night preparing: photos, emails, dated menus, correspondence, and one other thing: a signed agreement from 2013 where I was listed as co-founder during the pop-up days, before Ardina became a corporation. Astria flipped through the documents slowly, then met my gaze. "You have a case, and it's stronger if you don't broadcast it. Silence makes people nervous." I nodded. "Good, because I'm not here to scream. I'm here to reclaim." What followed were days that bled into each other. I became invisible on purpose, an archivist of my own life. I reached out to old collaborators, chefs, suppliers. Some sent me voice messages, others shared screenshots of group chats. One emailed a scanned drawing of a 2012 pitchboard with my initials beside each key idea. I found an old voicemail from my dad, one I'd saved out of sentiment. His voice crackled through the speaker, warm and tired. "Sweetheart, that citrus twist idea you had? Genius! You've always had the magic." I didn't cry when I heard it. I filed it. Astria and I met every 3 days. She always wore a navy blazer, always took notes by hand. At one point, she paused, then said, "We're not launching a lawsuit, not yet. We're setting a stage." Stage for what? For leverage. Leverage doesn't need applause. It needs pressure. Those words anchored me. Our opening gambit came quietly. A request filed with the Texas Secretary of State, an inquiry into Ardina's corporate structure, specifically changes made to the founding documents over the past decade. It wouldn't make headlines, but it would make someone at Ardina nervous, especially someone like Sable. The filing was surgical, just as planned. It didn't accuse, it questioned. I watched the back-end records update. When the request was accepted, I didn't cheer. I just closed the tab, backed up my files, and sent Astria a one-word email. Confirmed. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation, methodical and clean. Sable had stolen something. I was here to make her return it. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. Same apartment, same woman. But the reflection had changed. Not in features, but in energy. I stood taller. My hands didn't tremble. I brushed my hair back and whispered to myself, not with fear, but with certainty. "Round 1, big sister. Let's play." And as I turned away, the rain finally began to fall. But I knew I wasn't the one being washed away this time. The rain started just before dawn, not a downpour, just that steady kind that taps the windows like it's trying to wake you gently. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to it. The city outside was quiet. Even the traffic seemed hesitant. I had barely slept, but I didn't feel tired. My body buzzed with a strange mix of focus and longing. I glanced toward the table where my notebook still lay open beside the pile of evidence Astria and I had been organizing. Last night's defiance had cooled into something calmer, sharper. I'd made my move. Now came the waiting. And waiting was dangerous for people like me. It made space for memories to crawl in. I got up, stretched, and walked to the hallway closet. I needed to stay busy, to move. My plan was to clean, maybe clear the storage boxes stacked against the back wall. They'd been sitting there untouched since the year Dad died, 10 years of dust and avoidance. As I pulled one box out, I caught the faint scent of cedar. It hit me like a memory I wasn't ready for. I knelt down and started opening each container, one by one. There were family photos, recipe notebooks, catering receipts, and, at the bottom of the last one, an old camcorder. It was scratched but intact, wrapped in a piece of faded towel. Dad's camcorder. I stared at it, thumb brushing the side where a sticker still read, "Donovan Family Dinners." "Not every ally is still alive," I murmured, half to myself. But maybe not every truth dies either. I plugged it in, found an adapter, and connected it to my laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing a menu of old clips, birthdays, cookouts, holidays where the house was full of laughter and tension all at once. But one file stood out, no label, just a timestamp, dated 2 months before Dad passed. Curious, I clicked. The video opened with the sound of a deep breath. Then there he was. Dad sat at his old mahogany desk, the lamp casting a warm halo over his thinning hair. He looked older than I remembered him, thinner, paler. The study behind him was lined with books and recipe binders. He wasn't smiling this time. He was serious. "All right," he said softly, adjusting the camera. "I'm not good at these things, but I need to say a few words, for my girls." My breath caught. He looked straight into the lens as though staring right through time. "If you're watching this," he began, voice steady but tired, "then I probably didn't get the chance to explain everything." He paused, coughing lightly, the sound muffled as he reached for a handkerchief. "Ardina, the restaurant. It was Neil's idea. All of it." I froze. "She came to me first," he continued. "Told me about her vision, a place that felt like home, where food was a memory, not a transaction. Sable helped, yes. She had the confidence, the charm. But the soul, The recipes? That's Neil, my youngest. The one who stayed up with me past midnight testing lamb marinades when her sister had already gone to bed. He gave a small, wistful smile. If anything ever happens to me, I want that truth protected. I know how ambition can twist family, but the foundation of our Dana belongs to her. Always will. He leaned back, sighed, then looked down for a moment like he was gathering strength. When he looked back up, his eyes shimmered. Sable, if you're watching this, I hope you learn to love your sister more than you loved attention. The video ended abruptly, mid-breath. I sat motionless. The hum of the rain outside filled the silence around me. For a moment, I didn't even realize tears had started to slide down my face. I didn't cry because I was sad. I cried because he had seen me. Because someone, somewhere in this endless rewriting of history, had spoken the truth and captured it forever. After a few minutes, I reached out, hit replay, and watched again. Then again. And again. Each time, I noticed something new. The slight tremor in his voice. The way his fingers rested on a stack of papers labeled ownership draft. The way he looked off camera, maybe at a photo of us. It wasn't just a video, it was validation, a lifeline. When I finally stopped, I saved the file to 3 different drives. I labeled the folder Dad's Voice. Then I called Astria. She answered on the second ring. Morning, Neil. I found something, I said, voice breaking just slightly. It's a video. From my father. He confirms everything. Ardina's origins, my role, Sable's, omissions. Send it, she said, tone all business but laced with quiet interest. I uploaded the file and waited while she reviewed. The silence stretched until I could hear my own heartbeat. Then, finally, her voice came through. This isn't just evidence, she said softly. This is a torch. Her words made my chest tighten. So what do we do? Not yet, she replied. Timing matters. We hold this until we need it most. Sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Then we wait. But I won't hide it forever. I know, she said. And when the time comes, it'll burn bright. When the call ended, I just sat there, staring at the screen again. Dad's face was still frozen on the last frame, eyes soft but unwavering. The memory pulled me backward, to the last day I saw him alive. He was in the kitchen, the morning light pouring through the window. He looked tired, pale, but still tried to joke as he stirred his coffee. You know, kiddo, you could make anyone forgive anything with that lamb recipe of yours. I laughed. Not Sable. He chuckled weakly. That one's got her mother's fire. You've got mine. Then he reached into his apron pocket and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. These are yours now, he said, pressing it into my hands. Every recipe I ever loved and the one you taught me. I opened it later that night, after I'd gone home. Inside, on the first page, was a handwritten note. Food tells the truth when people won't. At the time, I thought it was poetic. Now it felt prophetic. By afternoon, the rain stopped. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in gentle stripes. I made myself a cup of tea and sat back down at the computer. I uploaded the video to a secure cloud drive, encrypted it with a password only I knew, and titled it Insurance. As the progress bar filled, I whispered, You didn't die silent, Dad. You spoke when I needed you most. The upload completed with a soft chime. Outside, the light shifted again, the same way it had the night before, when I'd looked into the mirror. But this time, it wasn't a reflection I was facing. It was legacy. The evening after uploading Dad's video, I sat alone in my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The rain had stopped, but the streets outside still glistened like polished glass. Every time the light from a passing car flickered through the window, I thought of him. Of the way he'd smiled when he said, Food tells the truth when people won't. It was time to tell the truth. I called Astria first thing the next morning. My tea went cold as we spoke, both of us mapping out each detail of the plan that had to be executed perfectly. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about precision. I remembered my father's saying, If you swing wildly, you'll miss. But if you wait for the right moment, you'll only need one strike. And this strike would be surgical. Astria arrived at my apartment just before noon, carrying a sleek black folder and her usual calm. She sat at my table like she'd done this 1,000 times before. I told her about Dad's video, about how it confirmed everything we'd been building toward. She nodded, taking notes in her thin, looping handwriting. "I've already prepared a filing," she said, sliding a document toward me. "If we submit this to the board under the guise of corporate compliance, they'll have no choice but to freeze Sable's access to the financial system until a review is complete. It's not loud, it's structural." I looked over the papers. Her logic was airtight. And she won't see it coming? She won't even know where it started. I let out a slow breath, nodding. My hands were steady now. Let's do it. By evening, the filing was in motion, submitted quietly through Astria's firm, disguised as an internal audit notice. No headlines, no whispers yet, just a ripple beneath the surface. But ripples, I'd learned, have a way of becoming waves. 3 nights later, the annual Ardenna Partners Gala took place at the Austin Convention Center. It was Sable's crown jewel, her yearly chance to parade the company's success before investors and the press. I hadn't planned on attending at first. The thought of being in the same room as her made my stomach tighten, but Astria's words lingered. The truth doesn't just need to be heard, it needs to be witnessed. So I went. The lobby shimmered with chandeliers and glass walls that reflected the glow of the city skyline. Everyone there looked polished, expensive, and eager to be seen. I wore a simple black dress, the same one I used to wear during our early catering days, before money and ambition had divided us. No one recognized me at first. That was the gift of being erased. You could walk among ghosts unnoticed. Sable stood near the stage, radiant in crimson silk, surrounded by photographers. Her smile was as wide as ever. Too wide. She looked like a woman who had convinced herself the story she'd rewritten was real. As I found a seat near the back, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I wasn't here to confront her. I was here to watch the scales balance. The lights dimmed. Applause rolled through the room like thunder. Then Sable stepped up to the microphone, her voice smooth and confident. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," she began, every syllable practiced. "Ardenna has grown beyond anything I ever imagined when my father and I first dreamed of creating something timeless." My fingers tightened around my glass. My father and I. She went on, talking about expansion plans, new investors, and awards. The audience hung on every word. But as she spoke, I noticed movement near the stage, a group of board members whispering among themselves. Astria had said the notice would hit today. The timing couldn't have been better. Halfway through Sable's speech, a tall man in a navy suit, Gregory Hensley, one of the corporate directors, rose from his seat near the front. He exchanged a brief, tense glance with a vice president beside him before walking deliberately toward the stage. Sable's smile faltered for the first time. Gregory leaned toward her, whispered something, and handed her a folded letter. She read it, blinked, and tried to maintain her composure, but her jaw twitched, her tell when something wasn't going her way. The microphone picked up the faint tremor in her voice. "Excuse me, everyone. Just a brief moment." Then another man, an executive from the parent company, joined Gregory on stage. He took the microphone from its stand and said, calm and professional, "Ms. Donovan, we'll be conducting a temporary review of financial oversight at Ardenna. Effective immediately, we're asking you to step aside from managerial duties until the process is complete." The room fell silent. For a second, you could hear only the soft click of a photographer's camera, the uneasy shuffle of expensive shoes. Then came the murmurs. "Is this real?" someone whispered. "What review?" another asked. Sable stood frozen, color draining from her face. This is a mistake," she said, forcing a laugh. "You can't just—" Gregory cut her off gently. "It's already been filed, Ms. Donovan." She looked out into the audience, searching for an ally. Her gaze swept over me without stopping. For once, I didn't feel small under it. I felt grounded. She stepped away from the microphone, still trying to salvage her dignity, but her hands trembled. Security escorted her gently toward the backstage area. The house lights dimmed again, but her microphone hadn't been muted yet. As she passed behind the curtains, her voice echoed faintly over the speakers. "This is ridiculous. That jealous ghost is still haunting me. She can't stand that I built something better than she ever could." Gasps rippled through the audience. Heads turned, eyes searched. And then, slowly, they found me. A few faces in the crowd, old investors, former employees, recognized me. Recognition dawned like dawn itself, quiet at first, then blinding. One woman near the front whispered to her companion, "That's her. That's Neil Donovan." Our eyes met for a moment. She nodded once, small but sure. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just sat there, hands folded, heart steady. When Sable's microphone finally went dead, the silence that followed was electric. I stood slowly, smoothing the fabric of my dress. The gala continued around me in murmurs and shifting glances, but it all felt distant, muffled. As I walked toward the exit, I could feel the weight of their stares, not mocking now, not pitying, but acknowledging. The cool night air met me as I stepped outside. The city buzzed softly in the distance, and somewhere, I imagined, Dad was smiling. I whispered under my breath, "One stage down." One empire left. Then I turned and walked into the Austin night, the click of my heels syncing with the rhythm of a story finally beginning to write itself. The night air clung to my skin as I stepped out of the rideshare, a fine chill brushing across my arms. I had just returned from the gala, its lights still shimmering in my mind, the echoes of clinking glasses and polite conversations ringing faintly in my ears. But all that glitter dulled the moment I reached my front door and felt my phone buzz like a second heartbeat in my pocket. Notifications were pouring in. Messages. Mentions. Tags. Then came the flood. Sable posted a video. Her face filled my screen, lit by soft, forgiving lighting. She sat in what looked like her living room, curled on a velvet couch, shoulders hunched like the weight of the world had finally caught up with her. Her makeup was artfully ruined, smudged mascara like mourning, a raw lip bitten just enough to seem vulnerable. The caption read, "Forgive me for what I did to my sister." I hesitated, thumb hovering over the play button. Then I pressed. Her voice trembled from the start. I didn't know how to handle the pressure. I didn't know how to share the spotlight. I made mistakes. Tears slid down her cheeks as she spoke, a performance of remorse with Oscar-level precision. She continued, "There were moments where I felt invisible. I held on too tightly. I was harsh. I let ambition consume the warmth I should have given." But not once did she say my name. She didn't mention Neil. She didn't mention what she had taken, what she had buried, what she had erased with a strategic wave of her hand and a silent nod from our father. There was no admission of how she cut me out of the brand we built together, no acknowledgement of the posters, the recipes, the meetings I wasn't invited to, just a vague cloud of guilt she painted in poetic brushstrokes. It was hollow, and it was strategic, because when the screen faded to black, I didn't feel warmth or peace or closure. I felt the sting of venom, cleverly disguised as contrition. This wasn't an apology, it was a warning shot, and I smelled the sulfur behind every trembling syllable. By the time the morning sun rose, the internet was ablaze. Reddit threads dissected every detail of the video, the word choices, the staging, the missing specifics. One user posted, "Why does she sound sorry but not say for what?" TikTok detectives went to work, splicing old interviews where I stood beside her at launch events, creating side-by-side edits of early promotional content where my name and title, Neil Donovan, co-founder, had once existed. Then came newer versions, cropped, retouched, with no trace of me. One food blogger posted a screenshot of my original pitch deck for Ardena. The post read, "This branding, these recipe notes, this doesn't look like Sable's writing." In the comments, someone dropped a bomb, a camcorder video, grainy but clear, of our father at an old family dinner. His voice, unguarded, said, "Ardena, soul by Neil, name by Sable." That clip spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the tide turned. Top comments under Sable's video changed. Apologies without accountability are just rehearsals. She's crying guilt. We want truth. You can't erase bones and expect them not to bleed. I sat in silence, phone glowing in my hand, pulse steady but alert. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even angry. I was watching the storm begin, and this time, I wasn't outside it. Instead of posting online, I chose something quieter, more intimate, more human. I pulled out my box of cream stationery, the good kind, with thick grain and a faint scent of ink. I handwrote every letter. My handwriting was careful, unpretentious. At the bottom of each page, I inscribed a quote from Dad's old admission. Ardina was built on Neil's recipes, Neil's soul. Each envelope went out to people who mattered, the founding investors, the first chefs we hired. Our regional directors, suppliers, and mentors who backed us before we had a logo. People who remembered. I didn't accuse. I didn't ask for pity. I simply told the truth. Thanked them for their role. And gently, truthfully, reminded them who had built the foundation they now stood on. Days passed. Then replies began to land in my inbox. This is the first honest line I've read since the drama started. You always were the heart of the brand. Thank you for reaching out. It confirms what we suspected. We believed in the brand, not the signature. One reply ended with, quiet integrity never trends, but it always lasts. I printed that one out and framed it, not for ego, for remembrance. Sable's video still dominated the algorithm, but the reaction had turned. Headlines now questioned her sincerity. Apology or PR spin? When silence speaks louder than crocodile tears. A prominent food critic wrote on X, one sister made noise. The other made truth. It got over 40,000 retweets in a day. Influencers who had once praised Sable began posting critical breakdowns. Comments poured in, stories of past incidents, unspoken truths, screenshots. What began as curiosity became collective recognition, and slowly, subtly, my name began to appear. Neil Donovan, not just a co-founder, the creator. Ardina's board began to murmur. Then came a ripple, a legal inquiry forwarded by an investor, an anonymous email titled, What Really Happened with Neil's Shares? The foundation beneath Sable's throne, once marble, now seemed like it was cracking stone. And I didn't have to shout. The cracks did the speaking for me. I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the small desk by my window. The city below buzzed quietly, unaware that a reckoning was blooming from the inside out. I scrolled through trending hashtags. #truth for Neil. Ardina. Authenticity. Unfiltered history. The digital world hummed with energy I could feel in my chest. Not rage, not revenge. Readiness. I looked around my apartment, still modest, still mine, and whispered to the stillness. They're listening now. Finally. I hadn't fought to be loud. I had fought to be heard. And the silence that had once suffocated me? Now it was on my side. The battlefield wasn't a stage anymore. It was the truth. And I was just getting started. The morning after the internet crowned its new villain, I woke to the faint buzz of my phone on the nightstand. My first thought was that it was another notification, another article dissecting my sister's fall from grace. But it wasn't. It was a voicemail. From my mother. Her voice, trembling, barely above a whisper. Neil, it's Mom. Something's happened. She's at the hospital. Please come. I didn't ask who. I already knew. The drive to St. David's felt longer than the miles on the dashboard. The sky hung low and gray, and the rain from last night had left the roads slick and reflective, like the city itself was mourning something it couldn't name. When I reached the hospital, I found Mom sitting in the waiting area, her hair pinned perfectly as always, but her hands twisted a tissue until it was nothing but wet confetti. She had a heart episode, the doctor said softly. It's mild, but she needs rest. I stepped inside Sable's room. Machines hummed, rhythmic, steady. Her face looked smaller without the makeup, without the armor of pride. For a long moment, I just watched her breathe, the same woman who once told me, "We don't serve beggars here." Mom followed me in. The click of her heels was sharp, out of place. "She didn't mean for it to go this far," she said quietly. I turned to her. "Which part, Mom? The stealing or the lying?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You know how family can be. Pride, mistakes. It's also—" I cut her off. "Convenient?" For the first time, she looked small. The proud Vera Donovan, who used to command rooms with her poise, now seemed trapped in her own silence. I took a deep breath and sat down beside her. "You taught us to be strong, Mom, but you also taught us that silence protects the wrong people." She didn't respond. Her eyes drifted toward the hospital bed where her older daughter lay unconscious. "Silence," I whispered, "can be more violent than screaming." When I left, I kissed her cheek. She flinched, out of guilt maybe, or recognition. I didn't know which. A week later, Astria called. "They want a meeting," she said. "The board and Sable." The words landed with the weight of inevitability. The conference room at Ardena's headquarters smelled of polished wood and tension. Sunlight filtered through tall glass windows, slicing across the table like dividing lines. Sable was already there, looking pale, fragile, but her eyes were still sharp, still searching for control. The lawyers sat opposite us, folders stacked high. "Miss Donovan," one began, addressing me, "given the extent of the documented evidence, you're entitled to full restitution, back pay, and recognition as co-founder. You could also pursue damages for defamation." I looked at Sable. Her jaw tightened, her hands clasped in front of her like a prayer she didn't believe in. I reached for the documents, skimmed them, and then slid them back across the table. "I don't want the money." A murmur rippled around the room. Astria's pen paused mid-air. "I just want my name," I said softly, "on every page where it belongs." Sable looked up at me then, confusion and disbelief flickering behind her eyes. "That's it?" I nodded. "That's it." She swallowed hard. "You think that makes us even?" I leaned forward, met her stare. "No, Sable. It makes us accurate." For the first time since this war began, she didn't have a reply. 2 days later, the official announcement appeared on Ardena's website and social channels. Ardena, founded by sisters Neil and Sable Donovan, inspired by the culinary legacy of their late father, Robert Donovan. 3 lines, that was it. But they carried the weight of 10 stolen years. The comments came fast. "Finally, justice, with grace." She didn't need to scream to be heard. "Class act, Neil Donovan." I read them in quiet disbelief. Recognition felt strange, almost foreign. After so long being erased, being acknowledged didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace slowly returning to its rightful home. Astria called that evening. "You did it," she said, without even swinging. "Sometimes," I told her, "the loudest thing you can do is refuse to shout." A week later, I found myself standing across the street from Ardena's flagship restaurant. The warm light inside spilled through the windows, casting gold reflections on the sidewalk. People were laughing, eating, living their ordinary lives. And that, I realized, was how it should be. Ardena had always been meant for the people, not the politics behind it. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope. On the front, in clean handwriting, it read, "To Vera and Sable." I walked to the mailbox by the door, slipped it in, and let it go. Inside was a single photo, the 3 of us in the early days, standing in Dad's old kitchen, faces lit by the joy of creation before it all soured. Beneath it, I'd placed a yellow sticky note that read, "I forgive what you'll never admit." Forgiveness wasn't absolution, it was release, and I was finally ready to be free. The morning air was cool as I walked home. The city was quiet, almost reverent. Somewhere, a bakery opened early, the smell of bread weaving through the air. As I reached the top of the hill overlooking the skyline, I paused. The sun was rising behind the towers, gold light spilling over glass and steel, over a city that had once watched me crumble and was now watching me stand again. I didn't win everything, but I reclaimed what they feared most, my presence. I whispered to the horizon, "You can't erase what was born in truth." And for the first time in years, I didn't look back. The dawn was soft and gray when I boarded the northbound train leaving Austin. The platform lights still glowed faintly, flickering like memories not quite willing to fade. I held my coat tightly around me, the autumn chill biting but not unbearable. In my bag sat the letter I had left in Ardina's mailbox the night before, words I had folded with trembling hands and unwavering purpose. As the train pulled away, I kept my eyes on the city's silhouette. The familiar skyline blurred through the glass as we gained speed, glass towers I once aspired to walk among, streets that had swallowed years of my ambition, and alleyways where I'd whispered dreams I wasn't allowed to say out loud. I whispered to myself, soft but certain, "It's time." By the time we reached Ashland, Oregon, the gray sky had surrendered to a soft, pale blue. Pine trees stood like quiet guardians along the ridges, and the earthy scent of wet soil and fallen leaves filled the air. Stepping off the train, I inhaled deeply and felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Peace. Not victory, not triumph, but the steady hush of peace. I had traded the noise of boardrooms and city politics for a small cabin in the woods. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I felt like I was running toward something real. I didn't need to announce my exit. Bryn's exposé did that for me. Just hours after I left, she published a bombshell article. The real story of Neil Donovan. It was piercing, but elegant, raw, yet grounded. She had taken all the pieces, my original sketches and emails, Dad's video confession, investor letters, anonymous testimonials, and laid them out with surgical precision. She didn't add fire where it wasn't needed. She simply illuminated what had always been hidden. When I saw the article for the first time, I sat frozen in my cabin's small kitchen, the only light coming from my laptop screen and the early morning sun pushing through the trees. Paragraph after paragraph, she handed the world what they never cared to ask for before: the truth. Then the messages started coming. My phone buzzed and buzzed. Congratulatory texts from old colleagues, apologies from former friends, shocked admissions from strangers. Some wrote, "I always felt something wasn't right." Others confessed, "I stayed silent when I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't a whisper behind Sable's shadow. I was seen." Truth for Neil began trending globally. People shared the article. Podcasts picked it up. Some platforms even changed their headlines. "Visionary erased, the woman behind Ardina's tech revolution." I didn't ask for validation, but I felt it anyway. I moved into the cabin fully the next week. It was modest. 2 bedrooms, wood walls stained honey brown, a creaky porch that faced a stretch of forest that turned golden in the mornings. I unpacked slowly, choosing where every cup and spoon would live as if rewriting the rules of my life. Ashland became more than a backdrop. It became healing. The silence between the trees spoke louder than any applause ever had. I started something new, small and personal. I began offering weekly cooking classes in the community center. Nothing fancy, just hearty soups, homemade bread, and the joy of chopping vegetables while telling stories. Some came for the recipes. Others stayed for the peace. One morning, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes asked me, as she diced onions, "Weren't you the woman Sable erased?" I paused. For a moment, I felt the old sting, the reflex to hide, but instead I met her eyes and smiled softly. "I'm the woman who got back up." She nodded, and the room felt warmer. That day, I realized the fight had always been larger than me. It was for every person who had ever been sidelined, silenced, or stolen from, because someone louder, richer, or more connected decided they could. A few weeks later, I returned to Austin for the last time. It wasn't a grand return, and I didn't alert anyone. I arrived late in the evening, cloaked in the anonymity of quiet sidewalks and autumn winds. I walked past the Ardena headquarters, taller than I remembered, but still cold, still hollow, and slid an envelope under the locked boardroom door. Inside it were three things: my formal resignation from any remaining advisory role, a printed copy of Bryn's article, and a handwritten note. I don't need to be inside a building to know what I built. I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't want to witness their discomfort or denial. Closure doesn't require witnesses. It only requires courage. On the train back to Oregon, I leaned my forehead against the window and watched the world roll by, trees blurred into smears of green and gold. I closed my eyes and thought of all that had happened, of Mom's silence, of Sable's betrayal, of Dad's final truth, of Bryn's brave voice. I wasn't seeking revenge anymore. I was reclaiming space, reclaiming identity. I wasn't a cautionary tale. I was a quiet revolution. I read some of the comments beneath the article again. She didn't seek to destroy. She sought to restore. A quiet storm, more powerful than any scream. We need more Neils in this world. I smiled, not because I needed their praise, but because it meant the story had traveled farther than I ever could. A cool breeze slipped through the open train window, carrying the scent of wet pine and approaching rain. I pulled my cardigan tighter, not out of cold, but out of comfort. The Oregon forest stretched endlessly ahead, and in that endless green, I saw a future. I whispered to the wind, to the world, to no one and everyone. Not all wounds need stitches, some just need air. And for the first time in years, I felt completely whole. I didn't erase the past. I simply refused to let it write the ending. This chapter was enough. And now, I was finally free. Sometimes, the loudest victory is the one where no one claps, because dignity doesn't demand applause. This story wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming truth, about finding strength in quiet resolve. What would you have done if your own blood denied your name, your legacy, your worth? If stories like this move you, real stories of betrayal, resilience, and redemption, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's always another truth waiting to be told.